You wake up. The world looks the same. Your phone buzzes. Your coffee steams. Another day begins. But something's missing. Not happiness, not success. Something deeper. There's a silence inside you that no playlist fills. A hunger that food, love, money can't touch. You wouldn't call it pain. It's more subtle than that. A kind of absence. A vague sense that life has become flat. Stripped of something that once made it feel alive. Maybe you felt it too. That feeling when you stand under the night sky and your heart aches, not from sadness, but from the unbearable weight of mystery. Like the universe is whispering something and you've forgotten how to hear it. We live in a world of constant noise, scrolls, updates, headlines, alerts. But inside, there's a silence that won't leave us alone. Some try to escape it with distractions. Others fill it with belief. Churches, movements, gurus, anything to give form to the formless. But what if that silence isn't something to fix? What if it's not a sign of something wrong, but something sacred? There are millions of us, restless souls, searching for meaning, but allergic to dogma. We want the depth of religion without the cages of religion. We crave the sacred, but can't pretend to believe in the same stories anymore. So what do we do with that hunger? Where do we go to feel something larger than ourselves when temples no longer speak our language? This is not a video about belief. It's about experience. It's about reclaiming the sense of wonder without needing to believe in God. Because maybe what we've lost is not faith, but the ability to see. To see the divine in the ordinary, the infinite in the stillness, the sacred in the silence. You're not alone in this feeling. There's a quiet movement happening across generations, borders, beliefs. Millions of people are turning away from religion, but not from spirituality. They still long for connection, still crave meaning, still feel awe when they stand at the edge of the ocean or stare into the eyes of someone they love. They just can't find that experience in temples built centuries ago. This is not rebellion. It's not arrogance. It's evolution. It's the realization that truth can't be confined to one book, one tradition, one story. The mythologist Joseph Campbell once said, "The symbols of mythology are not manufactured. They cannot be ordered, invented, or permanently suppressed. They are spontaneous productions of the psyche." What does that mean? It means that spirituality isn't something we inherit, it's something we awaken. It rises from within, not from external authority. Religions once held this power. They were maps of the inner world, written in the language of myth. Not facts, but symbols. Not answers, but doorways. But somewhere along the way, we forgot they were symbols. We mistook the metaphor for literal truth, and the mystery began to die. We started worshiping the finger instead of looking where it pointed. Alan Watts warned us of this. He said, "Religion is not a matter of believing things, it's a matter of experiencing the divine." And yet, most of what we're offered today is belief, doctrines, rules, answers. But what we're starving for is experience. Something that doesn't tell us what to think, but reminds us how to feel. how to sit with uncertainty, how to be moved by beauty, how to recognize the sacred, not in a God above, but in the breath we take right now. This doesn't mean all religion is wrong. Religions are like rivers, each one trying to reach the same ocean. Some are deeper, some are clearer, some get polluted along the way, but the current underneath is always the same. It's the current of longing, longing for home, for unity, for transcendence. And if that longing still burns in you, you are not broken. You are not lost. You are not empty because you don't believe. In fact, maybe you're the one who is still awake enough to ask real questions. What do I actually feel when I'm alone in silence? What moves me to tears when words fail? What is that subtle shiver in my chest when I hear a piece of music or witness an act of pure kindness? Maybe that is the sacred. Not as an idea, but as a presence, a felt reality, not outside you, but within you, always waiting, always whispering. So no, you don't need to go back to the stories that no longer fit you. You don't need to fake belief. You don't need to belong to anything. The soul doesn't care about labels. It only cares about aliveness, and that is something no institution can ever give you. But you can find it in silence, in stillness, in surrender. And the journey begins when you finally stop running from that sacred silence inside you. There's a reason ancient myths still speak to us. Even though we no longer believe in gods with thunderbolts or underworlds beneath our feet, we still feel something when we hear those stories. Why? Because myths aren't about the outside world. They're maps of the inner one. As Joseph Campbell said, mythology is not a lie. Mythology is poetry. It is metaphorical. The gods, monsters, heroes, and quests, they're not literal beings. They're symbols, alive, shifting, mirroring the very struggles inside our psyche. Think of it like this. The dragon we must slay, it's fear. The treasure we seek, it's purpose. The wilderness we're thrown into, it's the unknown within ourselves. And the gods we worship, they're projections of our highest and lowest potentials. That's the power of myth. It bypasses the intellect and speaks straight to the soul. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just resonates. Campbell called this the inner journey, not a path to heaven, but a descent into the depths of the self. And when we lose touch with these symbols, something inside us dries up, because we're no longer fluent in the language the soul uses to speak. We try to fill that silence with logic, with facts, with achievement, but the ache remains. You see, religion once held these symbols. It was a sacred theater, a living myth, full of rituals, stories, and symbols that mirrored the cycles of life, death, rebirth, transformation. But today, those rituals are hollow. They've become routines. And the stories, often taken literally, which kills their power. A symbol only works when it points beyond itself, when it evokes, not explains. That's what Campbell fought to remind us. We don't need to discard spirituality just because the literal stories no longer serve. We need to reclaim the symbols, not to worship them, but to let them guide us inward. And those symbols are everywhere. You just have to see differently. The phoenix that rises from ashes, it's every time you thought you were broken, but came back stronger. The labyrinth, it's the confusion of a mind overwhelmed, searching for center. The mountain you must climb, it's not out there, it's inside you. Layer after layer of fear, ego, shame, until you reach the stillness at the summit. You don't need a priest to decode these symbols. You just need silence, presence, and a little courage to feel what's uncomfortable. Because symbols don't tell you what to believe. They invite you to feel what you've been avoiding. And in that space, where logic gives up and metaphor takes over, something sacred stirs. Not because it's written in a holy book, but because it's written in your bones. You were always part of something larger. You were always wired for meaning, not manufactured meaning, but felt meaning. And if you ever feel lost in a world that speaks only in noise, speed, and distraction, go back to the symbols. They'll never shout, they'll never demand, but they will wait patiently for you to remember how to listen. You don't have to believe in the sun to feel its warmth. That's the kind of spirituality Alan Watts spoke about. Not belief, not dogma, not obedience, but experience. Direct, unfiltered, undeniable. Watts rejected the idea that the sacred is something distant, a throne in the sky, a list of commandments, a gatekeeper waiting for you after death. To him, that was the great mistake of Western religion, confusing the symbol for the truth, the map for the territory. As he put it, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The more you chase a concept of God, the more you miss the point. Because God, or the Tao, or the ground of being, whatever name you give it, isn't a person, or a thing, or a belief system. It's an experience of unity. A moment where the line between you and everything else disappears, where time slows down, and existence becomes, just for a breath, enough. You've felt this before, not in church, not reading scripture, but in the quiet moments. The way sunlight filters through leaves, the sound of your own breath when the world goes still, the tears that come for no reason when beauty hits you in the chest like a wave. That's it. That's it. No priest required, no theology degree, no belief in the supernatural, just presence. But here's the catch. The ego hates this, because in that stillness, there's no you left to control the story. No narrative, no past, no future. Only this mysterious, silent unfolding. Watts often said, "You are the universe experiencing itself." And that's not metaphor. It's the core of non-dual spirituality. You're not a skin-encapsulated ego separate from the world. You're the whole thing, folded in on itself, pretending to be separate, just for the fun of remembering. This idea terrifies those addicted to certainty, because it strips away the comfort of belief. But for those who dare to feel instead of believe, a new kind of sacredness emerges.
Not above life, not after life, but inside life. Watts pointed out that most people don't want God. They want security. They want to be right, to be saved. But real spirituality, it saves nothing. It breaks you open until what's left isn't a person with answers, but a presence without resistance. A kind of inner surrender, not to a deity, but to the flow of existence itself. It's like surfing. You don't control the wave, you ride it. And when you stop trying to master the current, you realize you were never separate from the ocean to begin with. So forget trying to define it. Forget trying to name it. Forget trying to make it make sense. Just feel it. Let the boundaries dissolve. Let the ego melt. And in that moment, you won't need a reason to believe, because you'll be experiencing what belief only points to. Call it God, call it the universe, call it nothing. It doesn't care what name you give it, because the sacred isn't waiting for your conclusion. It's waiting for your silence.
We are starving, but we don't know for what. So we eat distraction, scroll, buy, perform, post. We fill our days with noise, hoping it drowns the ache. But when the screen goes dark, when the notifications stop, when the world gets quiet enough, the hunger returns. That silent, aching question, is this all there is? It's not about religion. It's not about believing in a higher power. It's about a deeper thirst for meaning, a longing to feel connected, not just to others, but to something that makes all of this make sense. But the modern world offers no temples, only brands, no priests, only influencers, no myths, only algorithms. And so we try to build cathedrals out of productivity. We worship at the altar of hustle. We pray for success, followers, validation. We trade sacred silence for constant signal, and we wonder why our souls feel dry. Joseph Campbell saw this coming. He said, "We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us." But what happens when the modern world kills the myth? When no one tells the story anymore? When the hero's journey is replaced by self-branding? When the gods of old are turned into clickbait? What happens is this: we forget what we are. We mistake ambition for purpose. We confuse anxiety with aliveness. And we start looking for the sacred in all the wrong places. We follow gurus, hoping they'll hand us transcendence. We chase substances, hoping to shortcut enlightenment. We intellectualize spirituality, turning it into philosophy rather than practice. But none of it fills the silence. Not truly. Because the sacred can't be given to you. It must be discovered within you. And here's the paradox. The more you seek it out there, in books, in people, in rituals, the further it drifts. Alan Watts called this the backwards law. The more you pursue something, the more you reinforce that you don't have it. So when you chase the sacred like a possession, you push it away. Because the sacred isn't something you capture. It's something you become available to. And that availability only comes in stillness. Not in peak performance, not in moral superiority, not in following the perfect morning routine, but in surrender,
in giving up the need to prove, to fix, to control. And when you finally let go, even for a moment, a door opens. A door into something wordless but deeply real. And in that space, you realize you were never truly disconnected, only distracted. You don't need to believe in God. You don't need to understand the cosmos. You don't need to be spiritual. You only need to stop, to listen, to let life speak in its own language, a language made of breath and light and grief and awe. The sacred isn't missing. It's just been waiting, quietly, patiently, for you to remember that you were always more than a body, more than a brand, more than a name. You are a pulse in the great mystery, and no amount of content, success, or knowledge can replace the moment you finally feel that.
Maybe the sacred was never meant to be understood. Maybe it was only ever meant to be felt. A presence, a pulse, a kind of invisible gravity pulling you toward yourself. Not the self you built, the one with goals, opinions, memories, strategies, but the self beneath the noise, the quiet one, the one that watches, the one that has always been watching. You try to name it, and it slips away. You try to explain it, and it goes silent. Because the sacred doesn't live in language. It lives in the spaces between words. In the breath you didn't notice. In the tear you didn't expect. In the moment you paused and everything felt like it mattered. And maybe that's the point. Maybe spirituality doesn't begin when you find an answer. Maybe it begins when you learn how to sit with the question. When you stop begging for meaning to arrive and start listening to how it whispers from within. Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth, because the seeker and the sought are one." And Joseph Campbell? He didn't ask people to believe. He asked people to follow their bliss, not as pleasure, but as a compass. The kind of joy that breaks you open. The kind that burns quietly inside the ribcage when you remember you're alive and that life is sacred, even when painful. You don't need to call it God. You don't need to call it anything. Because the moment you try to own it, you lose it. The sacred is wild. It doesn't fit into boxes. It doesn't care about your spiritual resume. It's not impressed by how many books you've read, how long you can meditate, or how enlightened you sound when you speak. It only asks one thing. Are you still enough to hear it? Still enough to feel the mystery when the wind moves through the trees? Still enough to cry when music cracks you open? Still enough to look into someone's eyes and see not a person, but a whole galaxy trembling with fear and hope, just like you. This isn't about becoming better, or more spiritual, or more awakened. It's about becoming real. And to be real is not to be perfect, but to be whole. To make peace with the contradictions, to carry the questions like sacred stones, to walk without knowing and still walk anyway. You were never meant to have all the answers. You were meant to feel the depth of the questions.
And if you can do that, if you can stop trying to solve yourself like a problem and instead open yourself like a wound, then the sacred will meet you there, not with fireworks, not with certainty, but with something gentler, something quieter, like the way sunlight touches a leaf, or the sound of your own breath after a long cry, or the feeling of standing alone beneath a sky so vast you forget for just a moment who you are. And in that forgetting, you remember. You don't need to believe in God to feel that something is holy. You don't need to understand the universe to feel that your existence is not random. You are here. That's miracle enough. So sit in the silence. Let it undo you. Let it show you the truth that has no words. The sacred is not out there. It's not later. It's not earned. It's this, right here, right now. You, alive, and finally, awake.
If this moved something inside you, stay. We're building something for those who don't fake it. Subscribe, not just for the content, but for the confrontation. And if this left a wound, maybe it was meant to. Sometimes the best way to go deeper is to share the pain. Share it. Someone out there is still waiting for a sign, not from above, but from within. Maybe this is it. Not a doctrine, not a path, just a whisper that says, you're allowed to feel. You're allowed to search. You're allowed to not know and still be whole. If this touched something real, don't keep it. Let it reach the ones who forgot that the sacred was never lost, only quiet.